Last week we discussed freedom and how important it is to education, but also how neglected it has become as a topic and a practice in our institutionalized education bureaucracies. Freedom is a value we desire for our children, and therefore something we must teach them, lest they never learn it. Like a character in my most recent film, Miracle in East Texas, says, "Boys, you get your freedom, and freedom isn't free." This brings me to this week's topic of gaps. In the 12 years of schooling children receive, there are many things the school fails to even address, much less teach. There are so many, I couldn't possibly list them here, but I'll start. For instance, how to balance a checkbook, although that's a lost art now that electronic banking is being ushered in. Still, it's a skill that from an execution standpoint is quite useful. The idea of only spending what you already control. The adage goes, don't count your chickens before they hatch. But hey, the government doesn't practice that age-old wisdom, so why should we expect it to teach that sagacity to our children? Schools typically no longer delve into the home economics element that used to be popular. Keeping a house and family seems to be a lost art. Mending socks and doing minor home repairs and cooking, otherwise known as taking care of yourself and those around you, well, why bother? Again, the government positions itself as the ultimate caretaker, infantilizing children to the point of stupidity. So why should it endeavor to teach basic self-care skills that anyone should know? I remember a friend in college who nearly burned down his dorm because he tried to cook his can of beans in the can. Logically, you might think that would work, but practically speaking, it's just dumb. I mean, you can't stir them in the can. It does seem as though practicality has exited the education building. But aside from the more obvious life skills that our schools fail to tackle, there are simply gaps in learning that schools create. These may form as a product of timing. A young child who isn't mentally developed enough to learn a basic math skill might miss it the first time the teacher covers it. There's a gap that forms, and a drop-off from the student who no longer connects to that part of the material. Perhaps the teacher takes the skill up again later, when the student is better prepared and able to absorb it. But maybe not. Come test day, the student fails that particular portion and learns disappointment, insecurity. He is discouraged. A gap forms. Did you in school feel incompetent in one area but skilled in another? I remember it was a matter of course that science and math students weren't really the readers and writers that the other kids were, and the ones who loved history were assumed to be predisposed against math and science. There was a kind of a Maginot line between humanities and sciences. But that's not really truth, because the class valedictorian was good at everything. And there were other kids who were pretty good at everything too. So maybe that paradigm is an invented one, fabricated out of whole cloth, as they say. Just that some kids develop an affinity for one thing earlier than the other, and perhaps there are gaps for them that discourage them from pursuing the other. For me, math was my favorite. Reading and writing was a special form of torture. I studied biomedical engineering in college, but now I'm a writer, and I adore writing and history. I actually love teaching them as well. Go figure. It's sad to me how much I missed by not discovering my love of history earlier. Perhaps that scenario is true for many more than just me. Perhaps it's true for most. Schools are supposed to be more fair than, say, real life. They should present the best possible scenario for students. But if the student doesn't fit well on her chosen spot, her assigned spot on the school's conveyor belt of learning, that student will get left behind. It's not the student's fault. It's not even the teacher's fault. It's the system, stupid. Ask most first-year college English professors how their newly enrolled students write, and you are likely to hear some major complaints. Many go so far as to insist they teach the college freshmen remedial essay writing that they should have learned in high school. I know that I personally did not learn the standard essay until I got to college, although they did try to teach it to me in high school. I was in advanced placement English, but I had no aptitude for learning it then. In college, I wrote my first essay for class and I got a C. That was terrible. My professor, a young graduate student, was equally unsurprised and unimpressed. I asked a friend to help me with my next assignment. He screwed up his face, seeing my first pass at the next essay that was due. He asked to see my outline. Outline? I answered him. Well, little lady, there's your first problem. No outline. He proceeded to go over with me the standard essay outline. Introduction, thesis, 3 points, then body paragraphs with the 3 points, each with 2 subproofs, and then the What? Okay. I'll admit, it looked vaguely familiar, but in high school, I wasn't really focused on learning to write. In fact, I thought I would never use that skill. I wanted math and science. My high school writing was just to turn something in for the grade. I worked on my papers and scored good grades, but I guess my efforts weren't really up to par for college. But I couldn't afford to get a C on my college transcript, so I needed my friend's help badly. This outline looked a lot more complicated than it was, though, and I soon figured out the code. So why is it important to know the standard outline? Well, it's a standard for a reason. It's effective, it's organized, makes sense, and is familiar to readers, so might as well use it. You know, there's a school of thought that holds that only true masters can excel to the point of being able to break the rules and get away with it. Ski racers exhibit this. They ski as experts, but they flirt with the laws of science and gravity. Musicians, too, become so adept that they sometimes transcend the music with expression that tests conventional limits. This makes their work exciting for the listeners. But this all begins with learning the rules up front. And there's a second reason we teach young people to write well. The adage goes, writing is rewriting. Oh, but it's so much deeper than that. Writing is thinking. Good writing is good thinking. The writing program I pursue with my students includes them considering an issue and writing the positives and negatives, both sides of an opinion. In this way, we train our students to 1, be compassionate, understanding different viewpoints. 2, be fair in judging between both sides. And 3, be thoughtful, considering costs and benefits. Writing is thinking, and we want our children to be able to think. So why is it that most freshmen, and I finished in the top 10% in my high school, are unable to write well? They must not have been taught. I won't conjecture here why the schools fail to teach effective writing. Oh, heck, yes, I will. It doesn't serve the bureaucracy to turn out thoughtful individuals. The institution seeks conforming, obedient, subservient pupils. Teaching them how to think for themselves is, it's self-defeating for the rule givers. I recently did an interview with Del Bigtree on the High Wire. We were discussing the few lessons that the schools do teach effectively, one of which is to stand in line and wait your turn. A viewer commented, "Hi, Sam. Thank you for being a voice for children. I home educated my 2 girls in the UK. All their learning was autonomous. If they wanted to spend the whole days and weeks just playing and doing their thing, they did.